Today I want to talk about my reconstruction of a Nuragic warrior, specifically an archer, with some unique characteristics. So warrior might be the appropriate term to describe him. What's this video about? This video covers the reconstruction, explanation and interpretation of Nuragic archer bronzes in light of recent discoveries. It's a summary of the themes and detailed description I provided on this topic in my book. Let's start by framing who this character is, this archer. This is an archer type that I've classified as light. What do I mean by light archer? The ILEU and other scholars made distinctions, categorizing archers as heavy or light. This classification was ambiguous, often based on both sides, to determine if an archer was light or heavy. I have classified Nuragic archers as light if lightly armored, and heavy if heavily armored, slower, and likely serving different strategic roles. Lastly, note the weapons in the bronze figure, often misinterpreted by modern observers. For example, you often see on some archers, under the chest plate or cardiophylax, heart protection if you will, a part of the bandolier or dagger tip peeking out. This leather structure, called a bandolier, holds the classic dagger. You can see the dagger tip under the plate. The craftsmen, artisans and master metal workers were incredibly precise with this detail, likely for a specific reason, perhaps to emphasize the importance of the dagger alongside the warrior. Another interesting feature, besides the dagger, is the presence of a sword. Recent studies suggest Nuragic archers were equipped with a propeller to launch javelins. What is a spearthrower? It's a type of lever that functions to throw a long, heavy javelin. The atlatal spearthrower or zagaglia has various names from Australia to South America. In Europe, it was only known in the Paleolithic, not found in later periods like Mesolithic or Neolithic. Some thought Nuragic people had this thrower in late Bronze, early Iron Age, based on bronze figurines. However, as we'll see, the archer doesn't actually have a spear thrower. The archer carries a short sword along with arrows in the quiver. This sword could be used for both offense and defense, though it's hard to imagine using it defensively, as warriors typically wear protective gloves. Oddly, the archer doesn't have this type of glove. More for defense, as deflecting blows can risk hand injury when holding a weapon. The archer, focused on quick thrusts, likely didn't need protection given their fencing style. Traditional fencing stance places the weapon in front of the body. This is a modern approach, dating from the Middle Ages onward, where weapons became capable of withstanding clashes with other blades and parrying blows. However, in ancient times it wasn't like this. In fact, the object placed in front of the body wasn't the sword but the shield. By positioning the shield, warriors could block attacks and strike with their blade. This was common in classical times and early Middle Ages until about 1200 to 1300, when the first medieval treatises showed people using weapons to cross blades with opponents. The shield was no longer needed solely for defense, and the blade became purely offensive. If the stance isn't modern, with hand and weapon in front for protection, then the gauntlet isn't necessary. So, Nuragic warriors likely had shields, but archers could also position themselves with their strong hand back, using their left arm or something else as a shield for protection. Then, depending on the situation, they could strike in various ways. This is an interpretation, but interestingly, Nuragic archers, like those at Monte Prama, used a unique arm guard to protect against bowstring recoil. This object apparently protected the inner arm when releasing the bowstring. With any bow, you'll see the string acts this way. If just so, the string might hit the inner arm as it returns, causing some pain if the bow has high poundage. However, ancient archers likely didn't use our modern target shooting technique. As war archers, they probably had their own specific shooting method, not unique to the Nuragic people. Ancient armies like Saracen archers sometimes used arm shields, which prevented modern-style shooting. Interestingly, this arm guard is positioned to protect the outer arm more than the inner side. You can see here how the arm guard and glove aren't actually protecting the inner arm, except through this system I've interpreted as padding. It could also be lace marks, keeping everything tied to the arm. Obviously, we can't know for sure, we're just speculating. The most striking thing, though, is that the glove mainly protects the elbow. It covers the outer hand when it should really protect the inner part. Some archers use special gloves to avoid cuts from sharp arrow fletching, at least for some types of arrows. With other types, natural fletching is softer, so this problem doesn't really exist. Another interesting detail is two buttons often seen on these gloves. Some have speculated they were for arrow rests, sights or other purposes. I've personally researched this and have a video on this channel about how Nuragic archers fought. I've written articles and book chapters on this topic. Interestingly, this glove is very similar to those of Montprama boxers, who replaced the hand part with a sphere-like cap. We should make a specific video about that too, which will likely be the next one I upload. Not just about the glove, but the whole reconstruction. The other thing is, I mentioned that the glove seems separate from the arm guard. It's not continuous, but rather represented in statues and bronzes with a gap, especially visible in the Montprama statues between the arm guard and glove. Then I thought about these two buttons. In bronzes they look quite large, but in the Montprama statues they're actually tiny, really looking like small buttons. So I wondered if these buttons might be used to attach the glove to the arm guard. Some have suggested it's an arrow rest or sight, but in archery terms that doesn't make sense. You'll find many articles on this, like Brizzy's Bronze Archers, where various theories are proposed about its purpose. Certainly not a sight or arrow rest, as a finger is enough to hold the arrow and so on. The theory is this detail served one purpose, as in many bronzes it's seen not where the arrow passes, but in other spots. Above, inside. Oddly, never where the arrow should logically pass through. Interestingly, this detail is on warrior gloves too, who didn't shoot arrows, suggesting it might be a trick to keep the hand part attached. So what was this feature for? This was likely the shield I mentioned earlier, in fencing terms. If archers had swords, they'd need protection, as swords rarely parry blows. That's where the glove came in. Combined with the sword, it acted as a shield to parry blows. Besides leather's rigidity, this shield had an item that became useless once arrows were spent. The bow becomes useless when an enemy is just a couple meters away. It's useless if we run out of arrows, but it's still just a stick. This stick could be useful for defense against an opponent's blows in extreme cases, obviously when life is in danger, and so on. Certainly not for fun or sport. This bow was made with dogwood, a very hard wood. Tests showed it barely got scratched by medieval steel weapons. I'm not saying they shot with it, but cutting a hardwood bow, which is good for making bows, was probably quite useful and certainly not easy to cut or break. Even in medieval times, cutting a wooden pole with a steel sword was considered very difficult. Scenes of broadswords cutting through infantry pikes or tertios weapons are pure fantasy. We have this defense placed in front of the body, allowing both offense and defense with the sword. In this setup, the hand doesn't need protection as it's not directly involved in blade-to-blade combat. A glove on the archer's strong hand, used for knocking, can be problematic. As you can see, this is my useful hand for drawing arrows. We've found gloves make it hard to handle and knock arrows while drawing. Touch helps locate the arrow quickly, while a gloved hand makes this very difficult. Thus, once arrows were spent, the bow likely became useless. The shooting stance isn't the Olympic style with your body facing away from the target. Instead, you face your opponent like in fencing. Plant your feet firmly as if you're a turret. Aim at your moving opponent. They won't stand still waiting for the arrow. The body position is unique, allowing you to handle the bulky glove. You can see the glove's inner side has high contrast with the string, requiring a specific stance to use it effectively. The chest plate serves as the primary defensive element. The pectoral plate here connects to the quiver set, the quiver, arrows, scabbard and sword, via two leather straps. These wrap around the body and are secured at the waist by a fabric band. This fabric band, seen on Montprama statues, ties the quiver set to the system that goes around the neck and ends on the back. Why didn't I make this band from leather? Well, there's a simple reason. From behind, you often see fringes or ties hanging down the warrior's back, sometimes reaching the calves. Since these can't dangle on a bronze statue, they're simply engraved on the legs. These details are also visible on some Montprama statues, particularly on the sides. Interestingly, many bronze figurines show fringes at the groin area on the front of the body. So what's their purpose? What are they? Well, they're extra laces and a belt to secure clothing and prevent it from falling. This revives an old theory that Nuragic warriors wore two identical garments, specifically two tunics. Here, shown for demonstration but likely incorrect, the archer wears two tunics. Note the neck detail showing a different colored tunic underneath. However, if they were two tunics, the front fringes wouldn't make sense. Practically, tightening the under tunic offers no real benefit. Tying it or not makes little difference. I've tried it myself, as everything is held by this band or bandolier, which compresses the clothes anyway. The double fringe visible beneath the bronze figure's first tunic was likely a tie or belt for the skirt. So the Nuragic dress wasn't two tunics as recent books claim, but a skirt and single tunic system. Sometimes a third layer, likely a leather tunic, was added for mild protection against cuts. Bronzes showing two lines and fringes likely depict a belted skirt with a tunic over it. I wrote this in my 2016 book, and in the same month, Professor Ure independently reached the same conclusion. The bronzes don't wear two tunics, but a skirt and another garment. Many bronzes show only the skirt with a visible belt, sometimes unique. Those with fringed tunics also reveal a line likely indicating the skirt beneath. Let's conclude by discussing the helmet. The helmet has some truly distinctive features. First, let's talk about cattle horns. We're not sure what exact horns they used, but it's likely they were from a totemic animal. This would have been an important animal representing a family or clan. The bull, for instance, is depicted in the Domus de Janas. Though Neolithic, these predate the period we are discussing, suggesting this symbolism persisted for a long time. There's evidence from the Nuragic period too, like the shape of giants' tombs and numerous bronze bull statuettes, among other things. The stylized bull figure appears on vases and scepters with this bull horn shape. Interestingly, candelabras often have two horns, topped with spheres or a nurag shape. This probably isn't coincidental. Other horns are possible too, like mouflons or other animals' horns, representing totemic symbols. Notably, a bronze from Sassari shows twisted horns, like the animal it's leading, likely its totem animal. Lastly, equally interesting, but covered in another video, is the helmet's two bumps and a ring. Previously, many reconstructions showed helmets with 1, 2, or 3 small bumps on top. Actually, this helmet type, called a cap by archaeologists, has just 2 bumps, one in front, one in back. Between them is a bronze ring I've shown, likely symbolic, as it's not very practical. It's not for hanging horsehair, as bronzes don't show that. A showy, colourful element isn't depicted. It's not particularly useful for carrying. It can be held this way or that, doesn't matter. I don't think it's for hanging, as it could be hung like this or on a ceiling nail, like a ceramic container. It doesn't seem practical, but symbolic. Rings symbolize many things, like protection or the sun, as in Germanic tradition. The solringen is the solar ring. In some depictions, it's a disc, the solar disc, especially in Egyptian art, so it might represent that. Interestingly, on the front of some statues, like those at Monteprama, there's a marked line. This likely shows the helmet's closure system, a leather band meeting on both sides, creating a sewn detail that closes the helmet. Above this, there's a cap, and that's how the helmet ends. There's no neck guard, as it's not seen in the statues. What many think is a neck guard is likely a depiction of hair. Why do I say this? A small bronze statue found in the sacred well of Balao, Fontana Goverta, a place I'm fond of as it's my mother's hometown, has no schematic hair representation. Instead, it has messy marks, as if the craftsman thought, let's add hair, ta-ta-ta, done. It has 2 lines arranged chaotically, resembling fleece or hair. So, in more schematic, almost geometric representations, it's clear they still aim to depict hair. In fact, they often depict 2 braids on the side. The helmet straps aren't likely dangling, but rather braids, which held significance in ancient communication. In ancient Greek communities like Sparta, braids symbolized virility, quite the opposite of today's perception. The greaves, though not visible, complete the warrior's armor. Based on reconstruction, practical tests, and fencing with protective helmets, this archer type doesn't seem suited for formation combat. Multiple such archers together don't appear capable of effective coordinated action. Their defensive and offensive gear doesn't suggest they were static archers waiting in line to shoot at enemies from a distance. Instead, except for two heavily armoured Sardara archers, most Nuragic archers had armour covering their upper body and legs, allowing for mobility. Compared to Syrian or Roman archers, the Nuragic ones seem far more mobile. The quiver's position behind the face and neck likely aided in moving through bushes without hindrance. Notably, Sardara archers have their quivers tilted on their shoulders. This tilt allows faster arrow retrieval, unlike traditional vertical quivers for longer arrows. These were likely ambush archers or mobile combat specialists. There are still depictions and even photographs of tribal combat from the early 1900s or late 1800s. It was a dynamic style of fighting, with warriors spread across the terrain, engaging from afar until someone decided to charge directly. This aligns with pre-Roman Italian tribal armies. These small bands of warriors founded villages, moved around, and were often just a handful of fighters. The Villanovan culture, contemporary to Nuragic warriors, had few well-armed noble fighters, poorly equipped support troops, and single warriors who stood out in battle. Consider the depictions of bronze figurines with full archer or warrior armor, or the statues of Monte Prano. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more videos on Nuragic civilization, Sardinia, archaeology, and fencing. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. See you next time.